All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian from Monaco Auto Design, and today I wanted to go over the design of the new Countach, but also, if you've been following me on Instagram, I posted almost like a redesign of this, just some thoughts that I had based off of my initial reactions. So I actually posted a reel about this on Instagram also, which currently has about 400,000 views, so that was crazy to me. So thank you for everybody for supporting me on Instagram. If you haven't already, please go follow if you'd like. This is by no means, a knock on the Lamborghini design team. They do an amazing job. This is not me being like,
oh, they need to hire me. I am amazing. I am the best designer and they need to hire me right away because I am so awesome.
I promise it's not that. It's just having a bit of fun and sharing it with you guys. So what I'm gonna do is just turn on each layer and just kind of give you my thought process behind why I made those changes. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. All right, so my first initial instinct when I saw this was I loved a lot of it and I didn't like so much of it. And the first part that I noticed that I wasn't too excited about were the wheels. They looked a little bit just way too modern to me. Given that this is such a throwback design, it just felt a little off. So if I want to click over to my mood board here that I have full of just Countaches, I need to brush up on my Countach knowledge, but I believe it's the LP 400 and 500s that had this more circular, very iconic Lamborghini design. And that is kind of what they're doing here. Just it's too subtle in my opinion. So I remembered Vossen came out with a wheel design that was like a throwback heritage vintage style on one of their Huracans, and this wheel really caught my eye as to it being perfect for this new modern interpretation of the design. So what I did was I essentially copied and pasted those and I made them center lock and I fit those in just right off the bat. That just brings it up a couple notches at the very least, just changing the wheels. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next area, now that we have the wheels done, that I noticed right off the bat as well were the taillights. And I was a little disappointed here because they're essentially recycled from the Lamborghini Cyan, however you want to call it. But I noticed they were identical, and being that this is from like their one-off series, I kind of expected a little bit more. So going back to the mood board and really paying attention to these top and bottom, if you notice that what really is pronounced on the taillight design here is not necessarily these squares, but really this, I'll call it a hexagonal shape. It's not really a hexagon, but I think you guys can tell where I'm getting at. So my thought was to outline this exact shape. And if you look at this design, it's there, it's just they didn't call it out, and I wish that they would have done that. So my thought was to just add in some taillights that surround either side and kind of really emphasize that hexagon shape. So we get rid of the Cyan lights, and then that makes it a little bit more distinctive for this particular model. So that was the second thing that I did. So number 3 on my list of things that I changed were these vents on either side. Now I understand that given that this is an Aventador with a body kit essentially on top of it, is that I believe there are some radiators back here. So there needs to be some sort of venting, and I totally understand that. But one thing that is so iconic to me about Countaches, for whatever reason, is this area right behind the rear tire. It's just so simple, and how it curves from the bottom of the taillights. It curves in towards the rear wheel. It's a very smooth transition, even on like the non-wide body car especially. So what I wanted to do was kind of emphasize that smoothness in this area, but also keeping the functionality of those vents, knowing that they need to be there. So essentially what I just did was I just lowered them a little bit, and yeah, it may not be as functional as where they have to be. What that essentially does is that it elongates that area to kind of mimic that same elongated area that we have here, and also keeps the functionality. And then another bonus is at this particular angle, those vents, especially on the driver's side, almost disappears, because what we've done is we've lowered it so low that it's now kind of covered partially by the rear diffuser. So that really cleans up the look. All right, number 4 is the wheel arches, and specifically the rear wheel arch. Now we definitely have, again, the hexagon shape here. Again, I just wanted it to be a little bit more distinctive. You know, if you look back at the Aventador and the other models that have come after it, they still kind of have like a squared off look to them. Some are more round than others. I really wanted this Countach to just kind of go for it, and I love the very earlier versions of, like, look how radical this wheel arc is. It's very pointy, it's very unconventional, and almost to the point where it like kind of covers the tire a bit. And I really wish that they would have brought that back in some way. So very simply, I just added that piece that kind of is at a more of an extreme angle, so we kind of get that same effect. So I'll turn on and off to see the difference there. So again, that's just another bit of the DNA of the Countach that I wish would have kind of been injected into this new design. All right, so number 5 on my list is the top vent slash engine bay slash spoiler area. The original Countach, if you really look at it, it's a very simple design in some ways, but also very complex in other ways. So if you go back to the new model, if you look at this area in here, it's very, very simple. And if you look back on the original versions, it's actually quite complex. You have these big vents here, you have obviously the big spoiler, but you also have vents above the engine bay, but you also have this one specific vent that seems to be called out on most, if not all, Countaches. And I wish that there was a little more going on back here, and I think a good way to inject a little bit more retro styling was to bring those back. So I essentially added a more simpler version of some louvered inserts. And my thought was that obviously this is the rear wing, that if this was still active, that this would actually be cut in around here, so it's not like they're just pasted on top and this wouldn't be able to move. So that's another thing that I try to do for this. It was also just think about the functionality of all the moving parts that have to still be there for this, given that it is, like I said, an Aventador, essentially. All right, so number 6 on my list is actually one of the first things that I noticed as well, but it's this side vent. And I actually, the more I look at it, the more that I like it. But initially, it just felt way too chunky. My eye was immediately drawn to it. And it didn't let me appreciate the rest of the design. You know, so if you look back at the original Countaches, it's not that chunky, it's not that big. Again, I know that they're working around the limitations of the Aventador radiator setup that they have on the side behind the doors there. But I think there could have been a better way to handle this part of the design. Now, what I really wish that could have been done is to completely get rid of it and figure out a different solution to get the air that it needs to the radiators, and maybe even just have it clean, almost like the super early versions of the Countach. That would have made it more distinctive from the rest of the other Aventador versions, the Sion, the Veneno, etc. But given the fact that that may not be as realistic, I understand that. So my goal was to essentially kind of copy what the I think this is the 50th anniversary version. I'm not exactly sure, but the fact that this is color matched, it's a really sleek way to make that vent kind of disappear. And given the fact that this is such a big piece, I thought that was a great solve. So not only color matching it, but making it a little bit more simpler and pulling back this fin. So if I unhide this for a second, pulling back this fin a little bit towards the rear of the car and exposing, at least from this perspective, the door line, so you can see how it creases in here, which is reminiscent of how you can see it here as well. So it's just like little nuances like that I think like subconsciously you don't really recognize, but when they're missing, something feels off, and then when you add it back, it just kind of clicks. All right, and lastly, and probably the most controversial piece that is missing from this design is the iconic, and I keep saying iconic, spoiler, the rear wing. It just didn't have it, and it's a part of me was so sad to see that it wasn't there. And I understand that it's not in every version of the Countach, but it's such a recognizable part of the design. And you know, the Countach was always that poster car, and I feel like that poster that was on everybody's wall back then had the rear wing. That's a miss in my book. I wish they would have added it. but obviously in a more modern way. So my goal here obviously was to bring that back. Now, this is a very tricky exercise to ride both lines of modern and the original without it looking like you just pasted the old one on there. So if you look back, I'll just go up to this one. It's really just a bunch of straight lines, which is most of the design of the Countach, honestly. But if you look from above, which I don't have you can kind of see it here. It's a V shape, so it's very, very simple, very angular. Like if you look at the legs, they're very straight. They're not really leaned back too far. So what I did was I wanted to keep the same essence of that original design, but obviously in a more modern way. So if I turn this on, you'll notice that it's very similar to the old design, but obviously just turned up a little bit. So I kept the M plate design, which is very similar here, but it's a little bit more hexagonal shaped on this version. The legs are kicked back a little bit, that kind of mimic these angles right here. So it flows a little bit more, and you'll notice there's a hole here, an vent. My thought here was to maybe bring in some of the Lamborghini Ala system. If you're not familiar, it's this system that is on a lot of the newer Lamborghinis where I'm not exactly sure how it works. I'm not going to pretend like I know how it works, but there is some sort of aerodynamic system where it lets air in, and then there's a flap within the spoiler that opens and closes, and that controls more downforce, less downforce through cornering, etc., etc. So if there was some sort of way to bring in that system for this example, perhaps this area is where that could happen. So if we zoom back out, that's essentially where I landed. So let me know what you guys think. I'll turn this on and off a few times so you can kind of get a look at the before and after. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think. I really appreciate you watching. This was a ton of fun. Again, follow me on Instagram. I've been posting different versions of different colors and stuff like that. I might do a front view, I'm not sure yet. I don't really have too many problems with it. The rear view was really where most of my problems kind of lie. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I really do appreciate it. If you notice on the top right, it's 2 in the morning right now. I really wanted to get this out now that there's so much buzz around this new car, and also on Instagram there's a bunch of other designers putting together their versions, and they're all fun to see and look at, and I love these types of discussions and the fact that we can kind of put our thoughts on paper and talk about them. Again, thanks again for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be back soon with another one. Peace.